Great, thank you. Well, with that, I will gavel in the June 4th Vancouver Transportation and Mobility Commission. Sorry, apparently a month of not doing this made me a little rusty. But welcome. The time is 5 p.m. and I appreciate everybody that has joined us tonight for this great discussion. Okay, with that, Ms. Nishig, can you do a roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Fender. Here. Commissioner Gatton.
Here.
Commissioner Grandstaff.
Here.
Commissioner Fawn.
Yeah.
Commissioner Raya.
I'm here.
Commissioner Ruggles.
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt. Looks like she hasn't joined yet. Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Vice Chair Edwards also hasn't joined yet. And Chair Ramos.
Present. Thank you, Ms. Nishik. With that, we will move into the adoption of the minutes of the May 7th, 2024 meeting. Are there comments from the commissioners on those minutes? Okay, Commissioner Williams.
In the section when we talked about 112th, there's a couple of bullet items I think are lacking a bit of context as what we were talking about. And this is some stuff I scribbled down. It was talking about how would bikers get to the mobility lanes going north from 28th. And I think that would be better rephrased with no mobility lanes envisioned. How do cyclists get from 18th to 28th? So it's the context of no multi-mode lanes envisioned for that section. Likewise, the subsequent bullet item, it says consider removal of left turn lane. It's kind of like it's very generic, and I would add between 20th and 28th to allow space for an unbuffered multi-mode lane. So those are the two changes to add a little clarity and context.
Okay, bless you. And staff, have we made note of those corrections?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, do the other commissioners have comments about these changes? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adopt the meeting minutes as amended. Can someone make the motion?
A second.
Approve them as amended.
Okay, and now that was Commissioner Grandstaff with the motion.
And I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fawn, for the second. And now is another invitation to make any comments. Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to a voice vote on the adoption of the minutes as amended. Again, these are the May 7th, 2024. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All those abstaining, I'll be abstaining. Okay, so the motion carries. Yes, just making sure here. That's right. Yes. 2 abstentions, 1 abstention by Commissioner Gatton and Chair Ramos. Okay, great. Well, the motion carries. Awesome. We are going to skip the excusal of commissioners this evening. We'll revisit that at the next meeting when it becomes more clear who needs to be excused. Okay. I want to make a couple points here. I want to thank Vice Chair Edwards for stepping in last month, and to all of you for continuing to show up and have these extended conversations and decisions for the city as we try to achieve a transportation system that works for everyone. And then secondly, I want to welcome our new freight commissioner, Zach Gatton. Welcome. I am excited because you have been involved, an active participant of the Transportation and Mobility Commission, not as a commissioner, but as a consistent voice for the community. And you bring an important perspective. And thank you for stepping up to represent the freight community. And again, that hopefully we continue to bring you along in that vision to build a system that works for everybody. So welcome, and I hope that the ride only gets more exciting from here. And okay, with that, we will move into the first workshop or I guess the review of the letter of support for Northeast 18th Street, East Power Line Regional Trail Project, Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program. Is Kate here to present? Okay, are we deferring to Emily Benoit,
Yeah.
Senior Transportation Planner? Though Deputy Director Kennedy, would you like to say anything before that? Okay, go ahead.
So we are looking to apply for a U.S. Department of Transportation grant. It is for active transportation infrastructure, and this would be for planning and preliminary design. We are bringing this to you because it's such a large, important corridor in the city, and we are looking for your support. So it is a trail that was proposed in the 2006 Regional Trail Plan. It's a very long name, Northeast 18th Street, East Power Line Regional Trail. It will, the plan is to connect the Burnt Bridge Creek Trail at Northeast 86th Street to the extent of the city limits at Northeast 192nd Ave, with a potential connection to the Heritage Trail in Camas. So it'll be basically a feasibility and preliminary planning funding we'll be looking for. There are sections of this trail already built, but really making those connections to the existing trail system, as well as off-street multi-use path where it doesn't currently exist on 18th Street and over 205 on 18th Street. So a lot of planning work, like feasibility right of way, that we'd be looking for the funding in this grant cycle. So not construction, but yeah. Any questions? So this is just a letter of support saying that you are.
And commissioners, again,
Yeah.
the letter was sent out with the materials. So now we're welcoming discussion. Commissioner Raya.
So how much are we applying for? What's the anticipation of it?
The maximum ask is $2 million. So we'll be asking for the maximum,
Okay.
which is
If you-
pretty typical of a corridor this long.
Do you feel like that's sufficient to be able to get the project done?
So this is just planning work. We would have to apply for other grant funding for construction. So to get the planning work done, yeah, this is
Is it adequate for it?
adequate to get the
Great. I
planning
didn't
work
know
done.
if you needed any supplemental funding to get the planning work done.
We don't anticipate it at this point.
Thank you.
Commissioners, additional questions or comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Williams.
I'll just offer the comment that were this to happen, it would be fantastic.
Thank you.
And that is a very valid comment. Deputy Director Kennedy, what type of action do we need here? Do we just need a voice vote? Or I guess Attorney Rude, hello and good evening. Thank you. You're such a ray of sunshine to our meetings. Thank you. Okay, great. If a voice vote is sufficient, okay, great. Well, awesome. Then with that, I will entertain a motion to adopt the letter of support drafted by staff.
So moved, Williams.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Williams. A second by Commissioner Rea. Wonderful. Again, another invitation to discuss the letter of support. Okay, then I will add, concur with Commissioner Williams and others of on the commission that this is an excellent project, and I hope that we are successful. And thank you, City of Vancouver staff, for continuing to be visionaries on the development of our transportation system, comprehensive development of our transportation system. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, we will proceed to a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Anyone abstaining? Okay, the motion carries unanimously and we issue the letter of support. So you have our blessing. Great. What did I want to note? Oh, I wanted to note for the record, Commissioner Schmidt joined us at 5:06 p.m. Oh, no. You don't need to apologize. Just entering it for the record. Thank you. We're very happy that you joined us. Okay, now moving into the first workshop of the evening, which is the St. John, St. James Safety and Mobility Project. Presenting tonight is Emily Benoit, Senior Transportation Planner, Brett Setterfield, Associate Transportation Planner. Welcome, Brett. Thank you. And thanks again for running the mic that one day where we were like on the struggle bus. We will never forget. And Derek Abe of Alta Planning and Design. Welcome back. Okay, Deputy Director Kennedy, would you kick us off with an introduction?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a project that has been on our work program this year to get started. It kind of started in a unique way, though. You'll recall that this group participated in recommendations related to Fort Vancouver Way, and this is a corridor that would then connect up to that and continue to the continue an improved multimodal network north. I'll also say this is a corridor that's slightly different in that it's not slated for like corridor wide pavement work. It was really at the direction of our council, who wanted to make sure this corridor extended farther north. So it's not being done like is often the case for our projects, where it's like paving is 2 years out. We've got to get a cross section so we know what to put the striping down. This is more a longer term corridor plan that we can implement over time through development, through some pavement work, but it's not like slated for imminent pavement work. I think it's 6 years, 3 years out. One part of it.
One part is slated, so I'll talk about which one.
But yes, so anyway, just it originated in a little bit different way than what you're typically seeing. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'll turn it over to Emily now.
Thank you, and good evening, commissioners. It feels weird to say good evening when there's sunshine out, but we've moved to that time of year, so good evening. I'll be sharing just a little bit of an update on the St. John St. James Safety and Mobility Project. But first, to get us started, I wanted to orient us a little bit where we are in the project timeline. So right now, we are finishing phase 1, the very beginning, which includes our first round of engagement and the existing conditions of the corridor. We're now going to be moving this summer into phase 2, where the bulk of the design discussion, what we're actually going to do on the different parts of the corridor, is going to happen, and moving us towards recommendations for designs later this year. So this timeline goes basically from the beginning of 2024 to 2025. And tonight we're going to focus on the existing conditions, findings, and high-level outcomes from the community engagement activities that we've done so far. What are the existing conditions of the corridor? I'm sure some of you have been out there, maybe some of you haven't. So just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page about what's out there today, we wanted to kind of break up the corridor into 5 segments. So the map on the screen, it has different colors for different segments labeled 1 through 5, going from the south at 4th Plain Boulevard to the north at Northeast 68th Street. Each part of the corridor, it looks a little bit different and functions a little bit different. So we want to talk about what exists and what might exist there differently as we go through this project. So there's, in terms of land use, there's primarily commercial uses along the corridor, with higher density residential on the corridor, and then lower density residential neighbors off of the corridor as you get further away from St. John St. James. The corridor is designated as a primary pedestrian corridor and has multiple trail connections, such as to the Burnt Bridge Creek Trail. And at the northern segment of the corridor, up towards segment 5, is designated as a freight corridor and has industrial land uses at the north part of the corridor, as well as once you cross the city limits into the county, a lot of industrial uses up in the county as well as the road continues. There's also several affordable housing developments that are along this corridor in this project area, and more planned in the near future as well. So a lot of different mixture of commercial, residential, and industrial land uses as we move throughout the corridor. So the first thing we want to start with is the collision history. So one of the reasons we look at corridors is due to high collisions and safety concerns on corridors. So there have been a number of collisions on this corridor in the past 5 years involving vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. The last 5 years, there have been 8 collisions including vehicles that have interacted with pedestrians and bicyclists, including 1 fatality at the intersection of 4th Plain Boulevard and Fort Vancouver Way. There have also been 39 vehicle-only collisions, with most of those occurring at intersections along the corridor. And the majority of these collisions, vehicle collisions, have occurred north of SR 500, where there are more vehicle travel lanes, there's higher speed limits, and there's higher traffic volumes. So what are the existing conditions for pedestrians? To understand this better, we look at the sidewalk conditions as well as calculate the pedestrian level of traffic stress. That pedestrian level of traffic stress ranges from 1, which is the best, to 4, which is the worst, and is done using sidewalk width, posted speed limits, and traffic volume along the street. So currently there's a lower pedestrian level of traffic stress in the southern part of the corridor where there are more sidewalks. There's fewer and narrower travel lanes, and the volumes are also lower than the posted speeds. The pedestrian level of traffic stress increases, meaning that it's less safe and comfortable, so higher in the 3 and 4 range at the top. In the north part of the corridor, north of SR 500, which is where there are gaps in the sidewalk network, there's longer crossing distances and over on and off ramps, there's more conflict points for turning vehicles, and there's higher vehicle speeds. Similar to the pedestrian level of traffic stress, we also look at the bicycle level of traffic stress for the corridor. And similarly, the southern segment of the corridor has lower traffic stress compared to the northern segments of the corridor that have more and wider lanes and more and faster moving vehicles. So for much of the corridor, just to let you know what's currently out there in terms of mobility lanes, they're typically 4 to 6 feet wide, and there's not vertical protection or delineators currently out there. So what is the conditions for transit? Right now, there are 3 C-Tran routes on the corridor, including 2 local service routes, the number 6 and the number 25, as well as the Green Vine, which runs along east-west on 4th Plain. Weekday boardings are considerably higher than weekend boardings along the entire corridor for all stops. And the stops that had the greatest number of boardings along the corridor for those going northbound were at Fort Vancouver Way and St. John's Boulevard, and then going southbound at St. James Road and 52nd Street. So different number of boardings going north and south, which I found to be interesting, but well-used routes. And obviously the Vine along 4th Plain is a great connector in the city that is on this corridor. So what are the roadway conditions out there? It varies in condition and facilities along the entire corridor. So for example, the segments vary from 2 to 4 lanes, some with center running turn lanes, some with turn pockets. And the lanes range, this is one of my favorite things I found from the existing conditions, from 11 feet to 21 feet wide for certain lanes. So just there's a very different context on the corridor and very different conditions, whether it's 1 lane or 2 lanes. So just knowing that the treatments might look different because the conditions are different out there. So for much of the corridor, there's on-street parking on both sides of the street, and there's ample parking available at different times of the day. And also the pavement conditions change along the segments as well. And as we briefly touched on before, most of this corridor is not being repaved. The section that is planned as of now to be repaved is St. John's Road, north of SR 500 up to Minnehaha Street. So one part of the corridor. And then also there's a lot of different crosswalks of varying conditions and varying lengths. So the crossing distance for pedestrian varies in different parts of the segment, as well as how many and where the crosswalks are located. And lastly, driveways. This corridor has a lot of driveways, some residential, but mostly commercial uses, with a high concentration in the southern part and the middle part. So the middle part where the commercial uses are in the couplet. So there's a lot of spaces for driveways, and then also some wider driveways as you get north into the industrial uses as well. So a lot of driveways. So the existing condition also looks at the traffic conditions. This looks for at vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. The highest number of vehicle trips occurred in the middle of the corridor at segment 3, which is where the interchange is with SR 500. And this also has the most amount of lanes. So that kind of makes sense. The most amount of cars, the most amount of lanes, the most amount of people coming on and off the corridor. All of the corridors saw speeding, vehicle speeding. The largest difference between the posted speed and the average speed was also in that same segment of segment 3. So the posted speed is 35 miles an hour and the average speed was 44 miles an hour. So almost 10 miles above the posted speed limit in that section that also has the most amount of vehicles. There were more folks that were pedestrians than bicyclists and small mobility users, with the greatest number of these pedestrians being located at St. John's Road and 49th Street, which kind of makes sense with the school and people, more pedestrian traffic up there. And then overall, for the most active transportation users, which are pedestrians, bicyclists, and small mobility users, those were observed at Petticoat Lane due to the proximity to the Burnt Bridge Creek Trail. So the most active transportation users are at the intersection with the trail. So what is the current level of service? This was also, we also did the counts for this. The level of service ranges from A, which is the best, to F, which is the worst. Most of the intersections today along the corridor operate at a level of service C or better, meaning that the majority of the corridor today, drivers don't experience any delay in the morning or evening commutes during the peak hours, nor do they have to wait multiple cycles to go through lights. So the intersections are operating well along the entire corridor. The main and only intersection of the current conditions that doesn't operate at a level C or better is at St. John's Boulevard and 33rd Street in the peak hours, specifically due to the delay in the east and west leg. So there's more cars at the east and west of the intersection than can go through at one time. So it degrades the entire intersection. So current conditions, all intersections except for the one, functioning well and above level of service C. So for the future year level of service, we take the existing conditions and look out, basically project out what we think based on that, the future vehicle use will look like. And we looked at the year 2028, which is kind of the nearer term, and then the future term, which is 2040. So, 15, 16-ish years out. If I can do math, that sounds right. So many years out into the future. So similar to today, the majority of intersections operate at a level of service C or better in the peak hours and have available storage capacity to travel through the intersections during a given light cycle. Again, for both the future years 28 and 40, the exception is St. John's Boulevard and East 33rd Street. So we know that that's an intersection today that doesn't function at a great level of service, and we know that that's going to look similar in future years. So knowing we'll need to look at that intersection specifically. So just at a high level, I wanted to talk about some opportunities and constraints we have here. Based on the existing conditions. It's a lot of words up here, so I'm going to try and paraphrase a little bit from what's on here. But overall, this corridor we know is a critical connection on the city's transportation network that is utilized by many different users for a variety of purposes. So one of the main opportunities that this corridor presents is that it has a lot of right of way. Sometimes it's as wide as 60 feet. So that gives us a lot of flexibility of what we can do in the existing right of way and different options for design concepts that might be possible with lane configurations to better accommodate different users and operations along the corridor to increase safety, which is one of the goals of this project. Also, the corridor carries a lot of traffic north and south parallel to I-5. So there's a lot of opportunity to enhance this corridor for multimodal users and create more connections for people to use modes other than vehicles on this north-south connection as well. Some of the limitations for this corridor are in the southern section, there are narrow right-of-ways, especially at the intersection of St. John's and East 33rd. It's a very constrained intersection. And also over SR 500, there's long ramps and also figuring out what to do over an overpass also is going to be a place where we might have to make some trade-offs. So as the roadway, I think I mentioned before, the roadway conditions are very different in all the different segments. The treatments or the recommendations are also going to be different in different segments. So for example, in segment 1, it's narrower at about 40 feet wide, but segment 5 all the way at the top can be as wide as 85 feet wide. So different conditions, different design needs. So these trade-offs we will be evaluating as we move forward. So this is just a first look of where are we and what can we possibly do based on what we think the future is going to look like on this corridor. So I know that's a lot of information, so I'm going to pause here for any comments or questions on the existing conditions before we move into engagement.
Okay, thank you for that first part of the presentation. We'll go to Commissioner Rea.
In looking at the future, have you considered any development of industrial or multifamily or any sort of development on there?
Yeah,
that
so-
corridor?
Absolutely. So we use the traffic demand model from the regional Southwest Regional Transportation Commission. Nope, that doesn't sound right. What is C? Council. Thank you. I'm like, there's too many C's, too many acronyms. And that includes future land uses based on the zoning. So that is included in when we look out to 28 and 40.
Thank you.
So yes.
Okay, great. Commissioner Fun.
How is the accident rate compared to citywide?
I don't know the accident rate compared to citywide, but I can get that number for you if you're looking for that. But in terms of the reason that this corridor was selected is because it has a high number of vehicle collisions and it's a safety concern in the city. So that's how this corridor was also prioritized to be next. And
We'll follow up with you on that.
Okay, I was just following your presentation and I didn't, beside the accident, you list there's not much broken with this corridor to fix besides
there's a lot of
Yeah.
opportunity for enhancements to
yeah.
make it safer for all users. That's why we're looking at this corridor. So
I was just wondering if
Mhm.
if this corridor is the right place to spend money while we have other places in the city to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And typically when we build out a work program, we're looking at places where we have big safety issues. So our local road safety plan and our most unsafe segments of roadway or intersections, we're looking at our TIP and how it prioritizes different projects versus each other. And we're looking at our TSP modal networks and where we can build connections. This project was directed by council. They told us to do it. So it is on our modal networks, and so is an important piece. Would it be the first corridor that we would do outside of paving if we were to just choose it based on our normal prioritization strategy? Probably not, but that's, our policymakers directed us to do it.
May I follow up?
Yeah.
So it's directed by the council and we bring it to this commission. If this commission see it's not a priority for the city and we vote to say when we time to decide and we say it's not worth our money, the city money, then would they go ahead and decide to go with the staff planning and disregard our recommendation, or is that they will work with us?
No, they determine our work program. So the work program's been determined. What you'll be voting on is what cross sections that you think are the best. And again, I want to emphasize that some of this this is a corridor that will happen over time. So it's not like it's going to get built tomorrow through paving, right? We'll have a good corridor plan for this area and we'll find ways to implement it over time. So I don't think that there's a lot of productive value in voting against a cross section and a plan that's good because you don't want the council to spend money here. They direct our work program. You all are making recommendations on the recommendations for the corridor itself. Yeah. But I wouldn't say it's a waste of money because I don't think it's not like we're gonna divert funding from more urgent stuff that either is gonna be paved and so is very efficient or is a big safety issue. To do this, we're gonna do it over time with paving, with development. Putting a plan in place is a priority for the council, though.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fun. We'll go to Commissioner Fender.
Which segment of this corridor is going to have the highest concentration of the new multi-use housing developments that you're talking about? Like, do you know that?
I do not know that, but I would assume because of the current land use and the comprehensive plan we're going through, that will be determined in the near future of what the new zoning will look like, but
This corridor is identified as a growth focus area already in our comprehensive planning process, so most of it probably.
Oh, so it's just corridor wide.
Likely, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would need to, not entirely,
Yeah.
but given what we know about this corridor and our methodology for sort of identifying growth focus areas, most of it.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Ruggles.
Thank you. I was actually might have answered my question. I was wondering, thank you, Emily. I in all due respect to Commissioner Fan, I'm really excited that we're using vision to consider this for the future. So I'm wondering then, has this been identified as a place to have the planned affordable housing? And okay, one more question. Okay, go ahead. You're going to.
Yeah, so affordable housing is so not something that we identify on a parcel by parcel basis, right? So affordable housing requires someone who wants to build affordable housing, either a nonprofit affordable housing developer or the city or someone else to purchase property. What we do is we put the zoning in place to allow for specific types of development. If you could build multifamily housing here, you can build it affordable or you can build it not, but affordable housing requires a subsidy. So there's not like, we don't designate parcels for affordable housing. We designated parcels for housing, and who acquires those parcels and the income range of the price of the housing is really determined by who builds it and what their aim is.
You mean so somebody comes in and makes that decision and then the zoning changes?
No, we put the zoning in place for housing.
Like multi.
Yeah.
And then whether or not
or
it's
whatever we put in place,
okay.
whether people choose to build affordable, which requires generally a level of subsidy. So either some type of public subsidy, that's up to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, it's such a big area, and you were talking about how the tremendous variance, but I'm also wondering about trees. So is that going to be part of the plan?
we always look at how we can incorporate more trees. They are a traffic calming measure, and they also we take pride in Vancouver of having a good tree canopy. So as we move forward in this design process, that'll be part of that.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Schmidt.
I have a couple things. I wanted to speak to Section 2 and like the importance of it for people that are in transitional housing or kind of in and out of using like lower income services because the VA campus is right there. So there's a lot of, there's 2 treatment centers, a detox center, as well as like Lord's Gym, there's CMAR. There's a lot of places that lower income people or people in transition are accessing services. And those people are more likely to be traveling by transit, walking, or using bicycling as a form of transportation. So I think that emphasizing the importance of building up this corridor for that is really important, that maybe people aren't aware of that. I don't know if this exists actually, but having some kind of map of those services and how they connect to transit networks would be really nice. It sounds like it should exist. I could provide a basic one that's probably kind of crappy, but just with the idea of that, I think that this is amazing. So some people that might think it's like a waste, I think it's a fantastic investment, especially looking at Section 2. Also, and I don't really know how to word this, but something that really jumped out to me, because I'm always looking for these kinds of red flags, is with the existing conditions saying, okay, right now we have more pedestrians than cyclists. And so my mind goes, oh my gosh, they're going to think bicyclists don't go there. They're going to build it just for pedestrians. right? That's obviously a paranoia. But at the same time, I'm wondering when we look at these existing conditions to kind of use them as a model to move forward based on needs, it's also at the same time, the more ideally that we make these areas safer, that cyclists will use this route or pedestrians will use it more. And so just going by the existing conditions kind of gets me worried. Like, for example, I could take section 2 to get to work, but instead I take Grand down to 33rd and I go around because that part of Fort Vancouver Way sucks right now. However, if it didn't, I would be part of those counts of a cyclist traveling down that way every day. So to me, I kind of see that as a red flag. I know we've talked about that before with Commissioner Gotzel, I think a couple sessions ago, talked about how he feels kind of a red flag too when we have to choose between cycling or pedestrians, whereas it's more like, can everyone have a safe space to be? Why does it have to? So I guess in a roundabout way, what I'm getting to with my question is, how much are we determining existing conditions with those thoughts of how we should move forward with planning when we have to make those decisions? Sorry, I finally got to the question.
I wonder if you want to answer about the map piece first, about the existing.
Yeah,
facilities.
we have a map. It's called an essential places map. It maps where we have transit and various transportation investments and where essential places are around the city. So it includes services like the ones you mentioned, but also schools, parks, grocery stores, faith communities, other things that I can't remember right now. But yeah, we're happy to provide that if that's of interest. Yeah.
And I would say for the existing conditions, this is also noting that there are these users there already. We are looking at pedestrians, we are looking at cyclists, and not just grouping everyone who's not a vehicle. So there is some value in having those separated, more so to know who's out there today and not to have to put them against each other, but to say we need to have options for all of those users. So there will be things where at intersections, maybe it's about the pedestrians or maybe it's about the cyclists, but not to say we're doing one against the other, but to say that there are different concentrations of users at different places, so their needs are going to be different. So where there's more cyclists, there might be different mobility lane treatments versus where there's more pedestrians, there might be a protected intersection. So knowing what the user concentration is going to help us with the design elements that we would want to propose at different locations.
I just say our so policies is absolutely not, we have to use counts to justify infrastructure. Because that makes no sense, right? If there isn't infrastructure, then you won't have people using it because it's not safe. And so that's absolutely not the policy. The policy is, where are the modal networks we put in place and what are the characteristics of the area? And then we will build that, not because there's some outrageous existing demand, although we think there probably is some latent demand, but because it meets our transportation policies, our equity policies, our obligations to build accessible public infrastructure. So we're not ever driving things based on, like it's not there, so we won't build it, right? Like this. Yeah.
I would also add the existing conditions is one piece of this. That's also why we do community engagement. Where are those other places? What is not included in this? What is the user experience? So that's kind of the second piece of this workshop today, is to kind of get into what we've been doing and what we're planning to do in the future. So input like from you all on the commission, as well as when we do community engagement, also feeds into the where and what of what we recommend for a corridor, or what designs could or could not work based on user experience as well. So another component, not just the existing conditions.
Any other comments or questions, Commissioner Schmidt? No worries. Okay. Yes, I just wanted to insert a comment because it was relevant, just to encourage us to moving forward with this project and other upcoming discussions like on 112th to include either in the materials or as a slide that overlay of those services and the equity index. Go ahead, Deputy Director Kennedy.
Yeah, we can include the essential places map and the equity index. The equity index is overlaid with this corridor in the existing conditions report. The essential places, I don't believe that map is in here, but that is a layer we have and we can include. It works really well interactively if you are able to use one of those maps too. So you can kind of overlay different layers as well.
I should add, I don't know when the last time we updated the essential places map is, so we may need to update.
Right, yeah, okay, great. Commissioner Williams.
I would just briefly point out to Fort Vancouver, south of Fourth Plain is a great multi-mode, mobility lane. Paddon Expressway, there's a nice multi-use path that has, I don't know, is that 8 miles or something, all the way out to 164th roughly. St. John's is the gap in the middle that's really rotten. That's kind of part of this missing link. Some of it, of course, is county, so we'll do the best we can.
Okay, Commissioner Gatton.
I'm curious, at least specifically, sections 3 and 4, maybe I missed it or maybe it's going to come up here, but parking utilization, because like you said, the corridor is very wide. And a lot of times, this is a corridor actually I take my bike on almost all the time, but it seems like the parking isn't super utilized there, but just curious if you guys have done any counts on that, where that's at.
We're looking for it right now because I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. There is a lot of parking on the corridor, especially on the couplet north of 500 and south of Minnehaha. It's a lot of commercial uses, not a lot of residential, so it's also time of day. And also there are certain parts that have a consistent freight parking, not designated as freight parking, but there's a lot of freight who park consistently in the same spots along 3 and 4. So I would happy to get back to you with those numbers. I just don't want to give you the wrong thing because I'm not looking at it, but I'll connect with you after.
Just a piece of context on freight parking. Freight parking is a big problem in Washington State and in states across the country. And frankly, in many ways, it's an equity issue because trucking jobs are very good jobs, family wage jobs that don't require a ton of education. And so they're a very accessible family wage job, but they have these big problems around not having overnight parking. And it really, if anybody else was other people working in this condition, we would think this was like a really big deal, like not having access to a bathroom, not having access, you know what I mean? This is actually an important thing that we take really seriously because how important freight is to the economy. And so while you might think, well, trucks are parking there illegally, that may be true, but they don't have anywhere else to park. And so we're working with WashDOT and our partners locally to figure out where we might be able to work together in the county to think about where we have needs for overnight long haul truck parking and provide, because they're not parking in this couplet or other places because they want to, right? They're parking there because there aren't good options for folks who play a huge role in supporting our economy. So that's just a very big aside, but just want people to know that we're not going to go out there and all of a sudden start telling trucks to move because they don't have anywhere to go.
I would just note it's a concentration in segment 3 and 4 where we are seeing that.
Just the summary in the existing condition report. There's a whole bunch of data in the appendix of that details where parking is, highest volumes are, where the utilization is highest. But the segment with the highest volume is, as Emily was saying, between 3 and 4, specifically between 45th and 49th on St. John's Road. The other location of note is on St. James, going south, near the Ellen Davis trailhead. So there's a lot of parking activity happening there.
Just south of Minnehaha.
Right.
Okay. Lastly, well, actually, Ms. Nishik, has Vice Chair Edwards joined us virtually? Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm not missing her comments. I think what I'll just insert here before letting you continue with the rest of the presentation is whether it is at a future workshop or a separate memo to us, how we're matching up with C-Trans longer term goals for community routes. Because again, when we had that conversation about Highway 99 and not having that direct connection to the 99th Street Transit Center, that they were going to improve movement in the routes to make sure that they synced up and got people to where they needed to go. But then also, again, just as our community continues to grow and we expand the boundary, all of that, how we're taking that into consideration. And then I think another thing that might come up with community members in this area that I'm not as familiar with, any movement of by like the school district. So school buses, that's a common one that usually comes forward to the commission of like, well, during school time, you know, we're going to get stuck behind the yellow bus or whatever. So just helping us be prepared with the full picture for when the time comes to make recommendations.
Yeah, I'll talk to C-Tran first. And I would say we're already coordinating with them on this corridor. We're looking at where we can provide better connections to their existing stops, and where they may or may not be keeping stops along this corridor or adding new ones. So that conversation is already happening along this corridor, and will continue to happen as we move forward in this process. But we can, we'll double check and make sure that it's all in line with what their plans are too. And note that in our documentation. But that coordination is already happening on this corridor.
Okay.
It sounds like, I just want to clarify, it sounds like the commission would like in their memo, maybe not buried in existing conditions report, for like every project, an overlay of the equity index and the essential places map and the enhanced transit corridors map. And that's something we could just do if you want it. It'll make your memos longer, but we can put it at the end of all your memos if that's something that would be helpful, rather than not, you know, sort of just linking the existing conditions.
That's right. And that's what
Okay.
I was trying to get at with that. Thank you for clarifying.
We're on it.
Okay,
Longer memos.
great.
And then your second point, which was, I don't remember.
Oh, the school.
School buses. Yes, thank you. So yes, we are reaching out to the schools. There are some in the city and some as well in the county, because of where the boundary line is at St. John's. But we are not, some of the concerns we've had on other corridors are where we are looking to repurpose vehicle travel lanes and or have one vehicle travel lane. We're not looking on this corridor to repurpose travel lanes based on the existing conditions. So getting stuck behind a bus, things like that, we're not looking to change how many lanes there are today, just looking to change the widths and the configurations, not how many are for vehicles or not.
Not yet. No, just kidding. Okay. We'll continue to plant that, but we'll continue to have a conversation on that. Okay. Let's continue into the next part.
Awesome, thank you. So hello again, everyone. I'm Brett Setterfield. Talking about community engagement for this. So engagement on this project actually began in early spring, late winter, around that time. We have developed Be Heard Project webpage. We have also developed a survey that was open for a little over a month, opened up on April 1st and lasted until May 10th. And this survey also included an interactive map, so users could place specific pins where they have issues, where they'd like to see things, that kind of thing, similar to what we've had on other projects. For the survey, we translated it into Russian and Spanish. We received 244 survey responses, 4 of which were screen readers. And the interactive map had 260 comments. We also held an in-person event at Discovery Middle School in mid-April. This was alongside the Upper Main Street project. And we had some valuable discussion with community members in attendance, where we heard a lot about the importance of that north-south connection. And a big one is the connection to the Burnt Bridge Creek Trail, which is just north of SR 500. We also have email updates to those that sign up for the project listserv. We sent one in April and plan to send more periodically as the project develops. Direct outreach, we have done emails, as I mentioned, and phone calls to businesses, schools, neighborhood associations, which will actually be attending a neighborhood association tomorrow about this project, and religious institutions along the corridor and in surrounding neighborhoods, including those outside of the city of Vancouver. Clark County and Vancouver actually kind of runs parallel right along the east side of St. John's Road. And we also sent postcards to nearly 6,000 households for the survey and open house. So next steps, or yes, engagement for phase 2. So the next steps are once design options and elements are developed, we'll share that with the community. And this includes the evaluation process and short-term recommendations. And we will ask the community for feedback from the public, stakeholders, partners, all that. Outreach activities will include community conversations. We'll set up opportunities to discuss projects or discuss the project and questions with those along the corridor and those nearby. Partner interviews. We are reaching out to businesses, schools, faith institutions, all those along the corridor and nearby, trying to get that. We will get another survey once we have design elements or options developed. We'll distribute it widely, just like we did with the first survey. Continued email updates, tabling events. Summer is event season, and we have a lot of opportunities to discuss with the community about this project and other projects. And TMC workshops and presentations later this year. So next steps, summary report of phase 1 community engagement is being developed right now. When ready, it will be posted online and sent to the TMC. Design opportunities discussion, both within the project team and externally with community partners such as CTRAN, the school district, and development of design options based on input from those discussions. And finally, a design workshop with the TMC in the fall.
So there's a lot going on this project. There's a lot of reports in process, but also moving into the bulk of the project of designing what the roadway could look like. So as Brett mentioned, in the fall, we'll be coming back to you with these design options. They'll have different elements. It probably will be segment by segment on the corridor because they are so drastically different and have different needs. So the bulk of what we'll be needing your input on will be coming later this fall as we work to develop those over the summer. And I think with that, we will open it if there's any questions on community engagement or next steps.
Okay, thank you to the three of you for the presentation tonight. I'll open the floor to the commissioners. Okay, then I will insert a final comment of, again, thank you, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of how different the communities are along this corridor, and that you're taking that into consideration as you're leading the public engagement piece of it, and that'll really help us develop the best recommendation with, of course, the community need first and foremost. Okay, well, with that, thank you, and we will move into, I guess, the break of our meeting.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, meeting takes a pause at 5:53. We will reconvene at 6:30. Great. Thank you, Ms. Nishik, for starting the recording. The Transportation and Mobility Commission is reconvened at 6:31 p.m. with the official gavel. We are, staff members are working to get a microphone to the community forum seat. Okay. Welcome back, commissioners, and thank you everyone who has joined us and is continuing to participate in the meeting. Okay. With that, we will kick off the community forum portion of our meeting. before we call on the folks who have signed up to testify today, I am going to read the community forum preface. Okay, here we go. A community forum is held at each meeting of the Transportation and Mobility Commission. During the community forum, the public is invited to provide input. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the commission. I will help you keep track of time. Remarks should be directed to the commission as a body. Community members who wish to submit lengthy or detailed testimony are encouraged to email their comments to tmc@cityofvancouver.us. Please note that the community forum is different from testimony provided as part of a public hearing. In the case of public hearings, individuals that wish to testify on the public hearing item will be called upon during that portion of the agenda and not this portion, which is the community forum. In other words, if you want to comment on a hearing item, I'll call on you then. I don't think, we do not have a public hearing scheduled for today. And with that, thank you all for signing up to comment, and we welcome your participation, and we're excited. Okay, Ms. Nishik, who do we have signed up to give public comment tonight?
Yes, we have 5 people signed up tonight. We'll start with Alyssa Wheeler and then Jonathan Wheeler. Start the timer for you.
Okay, and thank you, community members, for sticking to that 3-minute mark.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Wheeler. I live in Esther Short here in Vancouver, lived here since January. Love it, way more than I thought I would. We moved here car-free, and I was kind of apprehensive about it because Vancouver doesn't really have the best reputation for being a good place to live car-free, especially with Portland next door. So I wasn't sure what to expect. But I've been pretty much pleasantly surprised when walking, taking transit, biking around downtown. But when I leave downtown, it definitely gets worse. Specifically, I want to talk about the St. John, St. James corridor that we were talking about today. I've biked it once home downtown, and it was not a good experience. It was pretty low traffic, thankfully, so it would have been a lot worse if it was like during rush hour. But even then, riding between a bunch of parked cars and then having just a strip of paint between me and cars that are going, in some segments on average 44 miles an hour, giant cars, trucks, SUVs, probably looking at their phones. It didn't feel safe and it didn't feel comfortable, and it's not a good experience. So thank you. So not only for that segment concerns me for my own safety, but my husband, that's on his bike route to work, and he usually doesn't take it because he could take the bus and he doesn't feel safe riding it. And whenever he does take it, I'm always like monitoring on my phone, keeping track of his location, making sure that little dot's still moving and I'm not about to get a call. So I'm concerned for my safety. I'm concerned for his safety. And we are hoping to start a family soon. Downtown is not really a bastion of affordable childcare. We've found something on St. John's, but I don't know if I feel comfortable with him trying to take our kid to get to childcare every day biking on that route. It doesn't seem like a great place to be taking a child with SUVs barreling down at 44 miles an hour with just a strip of paint between, you and your family potentially getting hit. So I would just like to ask the commission to please consider putting in protected bike lanes along this whole segment that we're considering for my safety, my family's safety, the safety of my community, and also, when considering our equity and climate goals, I think that this is an important proposition to consider. So please make this a protected bike lane. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Nishik, who do we have next?
Okay. All right. Sorry, it's going to be a little formal. Good evening, members of the Transportation and Mobility Commission. My name is Jonathan Wheeler. I'm a resident of Vancouver, Washington. I'm here to speak about the St. John's and St. James Safety and Mobility Project. Currently, I rely on taking my bike on the bus instead of riding along this St. John's and St. James Road portion of my commute due to the presence of the door zone bike lanes. These bike lanes place cyclists like myself in constant danger of being hit by opening car doors, making the routes feel extremely unsafe. This fear prevents me from riding my bike to work, despite my strong desire to do so. And I believe that safety should be a top priority in the design for our city's transportation infrastructure. The current emphasis on level of service as a metric is outdated and does not adequately address the safety concerns of all road users, especially cyclists and pedestrians. Level of service focuses primarily on the flow of motor vehicles, often at the expense of non-motorized forms of transportation. And instead, I urge the commission to consider prioritizing metrics such as safety and the reduction of vehicle miles traveled, as these metrics are more aligned with our community's goals of creating a safer, more sustainable, and more inclusive transportation network. By prioritizing safety, we can encourage more residents to choose active transportation options and thereby reducing traffic congestion and our environmental footprint. In conclusion, I ask that the commission prioritize the redesign of St. John's Road and St. James Road to eliminate the door zone bike lanes and implement safer protected bike lanes, as this will not only enhance safety for cyclists, but also promote a healthier and more connected community. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. We'll just keep going.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Jason. I do a lot of reading. Right now I'm reading Lord of the Rings, which is a lot better than I thought it was. I've been putting it off for a long time. But for fun, I also read a lot of transportation plans and data from other cities, which might not sound fun, but it's certainly interesting. I recently came across a system plan in the city of Bremen in Germany, and they had just finished paving 420 miles of grade separated bicycle lanes in their city. And what that's done is it's increased their mode share of transportation. So the daily trips taken by everybody in the city to an astounding 25% by bicycle. That's massive. But it's not the only city. I mean, there are cities like Valencia and Sevilla in Spain, which increased their mode share in some cases from 0.5% to up to 10% recently, just by adding connected and safe bicycle lanes. So today I just wanted to really emphasize connectivity, because I think statistically, when you have safe and connected bicycle lanes, you really get that huge abundance of mode share or ride share switched over to bicycling, because who wouldn't want to switch to a mode of transportation that's active, fun, good for your kids, good for you, safe, quiet, peaceful, and it's, I don't know how to describe it. It's just so fun getting around by bicycle. But that's a mode of transportation that can be activated if we build safe and connected bicycle lanes. So in regards to St. John's and St. James, I really hope that, like some of the other speakers have mentioned, that we can get bicycle lanes that are fully separated, whether that be by concrete or by some physical form of solid separation from flow of traffic, and also connected, so to businesses, schools, parks, on the side streets as well. Because if people can't get to the place they want to go safely, they're just not going to take that passage. And so if we don't provide a safe connected route, they won't take it. The same thing with Upper Main Street, a design that's going to be talked about later today. It'd be great to see that bike lane extended down to 33rd. That's going to connect another a bike or a bicycle greenway to Main Street, so people can go to Safeway or that firehouse axe throwing place that looks really cool. And I've been meaning to go there, and I would go there if there was a bicycle lane that took me there, but there isn't. So yeah, a lot of cities are doing what I've seen is a lot of temporary bicycle lanes with these like plastic posts similar to those little armadillos we have. But Seattle's throwing a bunch of concrete on the side too, and they're doing it in a cheap, fast, very efficient way to create temporary, even transitional to permanent bicycle lanes. So hope we can see something like that in the future. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commission, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I would like to echo the comments of Jason and the importance of safe and protected bike lanes. I have biked section 2, the lower section of St. John's and St. James. It is not easy and it's not fun, and the connectivity to the trail there becomes paramount, because that trail is the safest way to get east-west across the city, and it is it's outdoors, it's green, it's nice, but crossing St. John's and St. James is not fun. As for the safety of protected bike lanes, having separated bike lanes becomes paramount. Not being able, having just a strip of paint doesn't cut it, especially when cars are going 40, 45 miles per hour. 25 maybe, 45 no. You're not gonna get the uptake, you're not gonna get the use of bike lanes unless it's when cars are going that fast, unless it's protected. How to do it, there's people far better with those answers, but I'm really, really hoping that you can push for that. As for Upper Main Street, I would like to take a little bit of a different tack there. I have a huge interest. I live in the Lincoln neighborhood. I walk all the time down 39th Street where I do see cars. You know, it is a major thoroughfare between Fruit Valley and I-5. I really, really get how difficult of a corridor that is to solve and how many different partners, you know, people there are there. The sidewalks on 39th, get rid of some of the parking on 39th, sidewalks, being able to walk that corridor safely to get La Tida, Safeway, and around the corner. That is my interest there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commission. I live in Hazeldale, and there's a joke between my wife and I where when I do something dumb, we both go, and this is why men don't live as long. And the St. John, St. James corridor path down here, I actually wrote it down here, reminded me of that. I was like, yeah, she's probably right. It's the path that I like to take to get down here. You know, when I start from Hazeldale basically at the edge of the city boundaries, it sucks. Drainage just doesn't work. There's a lot of just debris in the road. In fact, I hit a bunch of glass coming down here, so I'm pretty sure I probably have a punctured tire or a slow leak. And you know, it's just the area I feel is just like an afterthought. There's a lot of space we can use to improve things in terms of for people that need to walk along the residential areas, for people that want protection from high speeds. I know reported is 44 miles an hour. I just feel like it's a lot higher, you know, so that might be the average, but the median might be a bit more, especially when you're going downhill. And that's just the part where for me is the issue, because I'm picking up speed, cars are picking up speed going downhill into Burnt Bridge Creek. And it's just, you know, anytime when you've got speeds and car brakes are good, but mine aren't that good. So I can't stop on a dime. And I already flipped my bike over in France this last trip. So I already know what that's like. Anyway, so obviously the area needs attention as evidenced by the accident reports. And I just implore the commission to consider what options we're going to have down in the future as staff and consultants give us options. The one other comment that I would like to add is outside of the project area, more towards like on Fort Vancouver Way, at the midpoint between McLaughlin and East Mill Plain. I saw like a bunch of high school kids with their sports equipment just like crossing the road, playing chicken with cars. And I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. There's obviously a desire path for people that want to park at the park and then walk their sports equipment over to where they're going to be playing, you know, or practicing sports. So like, let's just put a, you know, protected pedestrian path crosswalk right there. Like it's obviously wanted, like just do it. I don't think anybody's gonna have a problem with it. Hawk signals, all that sort of stuff. And lastly, I believe was it Ryan, that path on was it 35th? Anyway, I forget. That area is really challenging. My wife and I are moving down to the city of Vancouver boundaries out of Hazeldale, and that was one place where we said, nope, this is cool, but like this road sucks. Like it just doesn't work for anybody. We can't see ourselves living here because of the traffic, because of the infrastructure that's there and the conflict. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Mishik? Anybody else registered to comment? Okay, well, thank you all for your continued participation in the Transportation and Mobility Commission. We do listen to each of the comments and factor them into our decision making, so we appreciate that. Okay, we will proceed into the final workshop for tonight, which is the Upper Main Street Safety and Mobility Project. We welcome back Maggie Dirk, our Senior Transportation Planner, and also welcome back Derek Abe of Alta Planning and Design. Good evening to both of you, and I'm going to give Deputy Director Kennedy a few minutes to collect a microphone and provide us with the introductory remarks. See, I slowed down my cadence. Delivery. Okay, Deputy Director, on to you.
Thank you, Chair. Very short comments today. This is the fifth time we've been in front of you on this project. Obviously a very important project because it aligns with Mill Plain BRT and will support future growth around a corridor that's already been identified through our comprehensive planning process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maggie and Derek. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks, commissioners. There we go. Derek and myself are up here, but we also have Randy Johnson from DKS Associates, who led our traffic analysis earlier on in the project, available to answer questions. So this project, just to reiterate, the extents we're looking at 4th Plain, Main Street, 4th Plain to the northern city limits. That's just north of Rosh Street. It's where there is the railroad underpass. Cool. Yep. Okay. Today we're gonna provide a brief overview of our second round of engagement that we did, share all the activities we did, and how we promoted our online survey and open house, in-person open house, and mainly focus on updated design concepts. So these updated design concepts are both reflecting input from the TMC that we heard in April, public input, and then technical analysis, additional analysis that we've done along the way. So for our second phase of engagement, we had an online survey. We also, again, had that in-person open house. The St. John, St. James project was also there. That was at Discovery Middle School. And ultimately, we got 192 survey responses. Ways that we promoted and did outreach was sending out email updates to our project listserv. We did 2 of those. We also tried to coordinate more with C-Tran to really hear from transit riders. We didn't hear from in that first round of outreach. We also used other city newsletters, so both internal and external. Did social media posts on the city's channels as well as C-Tran social media channels. Again, hosted the in-person open house. We used Peach Jar, which is Vancouver Public Schools information sharing system to share information about the event and survey. Laurel and myself also did door-to-door visits to businesses. We tried to go at a different time than we did the first round of engagement, and so target different businesses as well. We also tried to target multi-family housing developments, informing them by dropping off flyers. And then again, we had materials in both English and Spanish. Overall, what we learned is folks were primarily supportive of the proposed investments. There was a lot of feedback asking us to go further, so wanting to see more pedestrian improvements, particularly sidewalks and crossings. Also more improvements for bike and small mobility facilities, going to at least 39th, in some cases calling for those being extended to 29th or 33rd. We did hear some concerns from folks about congestion and traffic impacts, concerns about, having access to businesses via, while driving, concerns about traffic diverting into the surrounding neighborhoods and primarily from removal of a northbound through lane. And we did, get confirmation that safety is a huge priority for people. They want to see lower vehicle speeds, safe access to schools and transit stops along the corridor. So now we're going to go into the refined design concepts. This is the same way we presented it to the TMC in April, our recommendations broken out by different segments of the corridor. And again, that was really to acknowledge the different context of these various segments. So there's, different dimensions we're working with. There's different cross sections, different destinations and land uses. And as we walk through this, we'll recap essentially what we had brought in April, what we heard, what we considered in our additional analysis and work, and then where we landed in our updated concepts. So first, talking about corridor-wide recommendations. So this really has to do with crossing improvements. So, initially in our first round of engagement, we had heard that, people didn't feel safe using crossings and that they wanted to see more crosswalks. We, acknowledged that there were some gaps in our crosswalk spacing and that based on our pedestrian crossing policy, needing to fill those gaps. Ultimately, the way these are listed on the slide here, and I'll read through them, but we asked folks in our online survey and at the open house which locations people supported adding a new marked crossing. So number one being north side of 31st Street. So that's right by Vancouver School of Arts and Academic. We got the most support for that crossing. The south side of the 28th Street intersection, so by Dairy Queen, that came in second, if you will. The south side of 35th Street, so by Peace Health Medical Center, that was the third most supported. South side of 37th Street, so by Safeway, fourth most supported, and lastly, only 6.5% said none of these locations. I do want to emphasize, that for going forward, essentially these crossings will be recommended as part of our sort of implementation plan. This input from the survey is one piece of prioritization that we use. So it's not the only thing. So this isn't the final prioritization. This is just what we heard from the community. One thing, for example, is where we see the biggest crossing gaps on Main Street would be the 31st Street crossing and the 35th Street crossing would be filling those gaps. So 35th, might be a higher priority than 28th. So that more to come on what our final implementation on that would be. And then also median islands. We talked about adding these at these new crossing locations in particular. Really in that first round of engagement, we heard that, people want to see more investments at existing crossings to make them feel safer and also at new crossings. Median islands, we talked about at our last TMC meeting, there was some concerns from commissioners about them. Really they're there to not only would reduce the number of travel lanes. So it's a traffic calming measure, but you're by no means required as a pedestrian to stop there. They're there to, protect people in the event that cars don't stop. There is a place for pedestrians to be safe and protected. The way they would be designed is essentially, there would be a cut through in the median island that would be level with the street. So it's not have, you know, if someone in a wheelchair doesn't have to ramp up onto the median island. And, you know, we are, whether we'd have add a push button in the median island that, you know, so someone could cross halfway is something we'll have to look into. But essentially, you know, it would be push activated on either side of the sidewalk for someone to cross through. So just wanted to preemptively try and address some of those concerns that we heard last time. They are, you know, a really good proven safety measure. The US DOT says up to a 32% reduction in pedestrian crashes. So they do improve safety at crossings. So again, the way they're listed on our slide here. So first, the most supported location for a median island was at the proposed 31st Street crossing. For a median island at the 28th Street crossing was second most supported. At the 37th Street crossings, both the existing and the new one we proposed were third most supported, and then 35th Street was fourth most supported for a median island. And there was a larger percentage of people, almost 22%, who said none of these. So there was some, you know, pushback on putting median islands. Again, this is not our final prioritization. This is just what the prioritization we got from the survey. So we'll be sharing, these will be recommended locations, but in terms of what their prioritization of construction and implementation will be, this isn't final. So now we go diving into the different segments. So starting segment 1 from 4th Plain to 29th Street. The original recommendation we had here was to shift the existing crossing at 29th Street from the north side of the intersection to the south side of the intersection. We had heard that people don't feel safe using this existing crossing. The visibility is really challenging at this intersection. This is also where Broadway is coming up and joining Main Street here. And we also proposed adding a median island at this location. So that would essentially take the northbound dedicated left turn lane. Ultimately, in the survey, you know, people were pretty supportive of it. 60% of survey respondents support or strongly support this recommendation. We also heard considerations about, well, why not keep both crossings? So having one on the north and south side of the intersection. This also intersects with 29th Street here, which is another safety and mobility project we have. So looking at what the network recommendations in our transportation system plan say for that street. And we had pretty low traffic volumes, especially the turning movements, left turning movements. So ultimately, we decided to take this design a little further. We are now proposing that we have a marked crossing on both the north side and the south side of the intersection. We would keep the rapid flashing beacon. You know, we're looking into whether that would be push activated from both crossings, or whether the south side crossing wouldn't have a rapid flashing beacon. It would just be the north side. We'd essentially replace both the northbound and southbound left turn lanes with a median island, and would have cut-throughs for people using bikes or small mobility devices, which really supports, you know, both slowing speeds and prioritizing pedestrians in this section for the Upper Main Street project. And it helps, you know, with the future neighborhood greenway on 29th Street. So essentially, folks driving on 29th Street, they would only be able to turn right off of the street, and folks driving on Main Street would only be able to turn right onto 29th. Given that we have, you know, more of a grid street network here, folks that, want to make that left turn can go right up to, 33rd or 31st to make that left turn if they need to. I'll also add that just north of here at 29th is where we're proposing that one northbound through lane be removed. So north of 29th, probably till about 30th or 31st is where that merge of the two northbound travel lanes would happen. So moving
Sorry,
on.
if I can pause the presentation so that we can take comments segment by segment on this
sure.
project, if that works.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Commissioners, I'll open the floor and I'll keep the time. I'll help moderate the time, obviously, so that we can stick within that presentation time frame. But comments on this segment, Commissioner Ruggles, go ahead.
I just wanted to say how much I appreciate your outreach methods and how many people you reached and how you changed the time up and that you did door to door and all of that. You got a lot of results. So it feels like a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Concentration of data. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Schmidt.
This isn't really a question about, can we still ask about the median crosswalks too, since was.
Yeah.
Okay,
go
cool.
ahead.
I just had a question because we're talking about the safety with that idea of someone having to wait in the middle at the median island if we're going to have the traffic signal allow for part of that or whole. Sorry, I'm trying to ask this intelligently. So in regards to the studies that have shown that it's successful, are those studies having the person able to cross the median island completely, or are those studies reflective of them having to possibly wait? Like, because I think that would add a major difference to the efficacy of having the median island, and the safety is stuck in the middle of the road. Like,
yeah. So traditionally, the way these are designed is there wouldn't be a push button in the median island. It would essentially function just like you were crossing, 4 lanes of traffic today along Main Street. It would be that same, except now you're crossing 3 lanes of traffic and there's a space for you to stop and wait if you want. You by no means have to stop and wait and push another button to continue on to the rest of, through the crossing.
So typically these are called refuge islands. So this is in a marked crosswalk without any signalization. So you're not pushing anything, right? Typically, usually. Yeah. Maybe you are, but typically you're just, it's a marked crosswalk where drivers are supposed to stop. The refuge island is a place to take refuge if they don't, and to reduce the total crossing distance. So if they don't stop or you don't have time, you could cross a part of the roadway and then the other. These are it's a very clearly demonstrated safety improvement that reduces total crossing distance at a time for pedestrians and basically gives you a safer option if you have to stop in the middle of the road because the driver doesn't stop when they're supposed to. Does that make sense? Okay.
In the case of, mentioning a push button, that would be if there was a rapid flashing beacon there. Yeah.
And then I also wanted to ask about, because we said it wouldn't be raised or anything, so they wouldn't block wheelchairs. I'm picturing, and I always picture this as my most extreme example, is the cyclist with the cans. Like if you've ever rode with a cargo trailer, it's wider. I mean, you can't even get into the floating bus stops really with the way that is. So picturing somebody, cyclist with a can, using this, crossing it, would that still be wide enough for them to be able to do that?
Okay. So yeah, and in a lot of cases that is a deficiency, that is a challenge, right? Because oftentimes you only have 6 feet. So you have your detectable warning surfaces, right? That's 2 feet. You have on both ends, and then you have 2 feet in between, 6 feet. And 6 feet, as you know, is about the length of a full length, traditional conventional bicycle, right? So if you have a trailer, if you have a cargo bike, if you have a long tail, you have any of those things, it's really hard to fit in 6 feet, right? The medians that we're proposing here occupy an entire travel lane width, which is usually about 10 feet. So it's much wider and more accommodating for longer bikes, other devices, multiple people using those devices. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, great.
Okay, great. We'll go to Commissioner Grandstaff.
Yeah, I just had a question regarding medians as well. I guess the question is what makes this area unique where we're considering a design concept like this? Like, is the street wider than most streets? I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, what about this particular project is having us really consider these medians?
Yeah, I mean, so this section of Main Street, so from the whole project corridor, Fourth Lane to the city limits, is identified in the transportation system plan as on our primary pedestrian network. So we want to prioritize pedestrian movements along this section. So this being one way that we can enhance safety at crossings for pedestrians. We're also wanting to slow down traffic speeds. So the median islands, essentially take up a lane of where cars used to be. So it also just helps slow speeds. But really the main driver being that we want a goal of our project is to improve pedestrian safety. And these help do that at crossings.
I also want to be clear, like, this is not, we have refuge islands or median islands all over the city. So you have them on Fourth Plain at various locations. We also have places where we have medians. So like, for example, Mill Plain Boulevard has a median all the way through. It's not always like a great place to cross or stop, but it is a place where you're probably not going to be hit by a car if you have to stop. So we use this treatment, which is essentially to say, we're going to put some vertical thing in the road where people are crossing so that if they need to stop because cars don't, they can't be hit from the center lane, right? Like that's the goal. And so we have various, this is not like the only location we're proposing these, but to Maggie's point, it's a primary pedestrian corridor. And so, and we heard a lot about crossings. So we're proposing a treatment that will narrow crossing distances and make it safer if drivers don't behave the way they're supposed to, which they don't always. None of us do.
And that just reminded me, Rebecca's comment that, it has demonstrated safety and comfort benefits for pedestrians, but it also has overall system-wide benefits. It has safety benefits for drivers as well because of the traffic calming effects that type of hardscaping in the streetscape provide, right? So that hardened curb in the middle of the street is going to encourage folks to drive slower. And thereby, realizing the benefits for themselves and for all the other road users.
Okay. We will go to Commissioner Gatton. We can hand him the microphone, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to voice support for those pedestrian refuge islands. Those are really great. I use one on Fourth Plain actually quite a bit. Given that one is a push button, it's right at a vine stop, but it is effective at least there. And along those lines, I'm curious, as far as I understand correctly, we're not planning on having any push buttons here for pedestrians, but I kind of wonder, with this also being a greenway, or at least in the future being a greenway, possibly having at least some kind of flashing beacon, even if it's just always on as like a heads up to drivers, hey, this is an area where bikes are going to be crossing and pedestrians are going to be crossing, rather than as it currently exists where you're kind of just waiting until it's your turn, and just having some kind of visual cue for drivers that 29th is an area where people are going to be crossing both as pedestrians and as mobility users.
Yeah, so at 29th Street here, there is already a rapid flashing beacon on the north side. So I don't know the mechanics of whether we could put push buttons on the south side of the street to then connect to that existing rapid flashing beacon, or whether we'd, be looking at putting in a whole new rapid flashing beacon on the south side. So there is some existing signalization here, though.
And I'll just add that the timing, whenever there is a push button and this, whether it's a signal or it's a beacon, the timing would be adjusted to accommodate a crossing, the full crossing, right? So that you're not stranded in a refuge, or you can only make half of that crossing. So.
Okay. Commissioner Williams.
Can you describe what that vertical relief is, the light gray in your picture?
Yeah, so that's showing essentially median islands. So yeah, it's a vertical element that is concrete constructed there. Essentially what we're showing is cut throughs at the crosswalk. So someone using a mobility device could, roll straight through. And then there's also gaps more central in the intersection for bike or e-scooters to cut through. So that's the various gaps you're seeing.
So my experience in seeing the color differential between concrete and asphalt is when both are brand fresh, just really stark difference. About 5 years, they're an equal shade of gray. Is there a chamfer on the side of these islands, or if one were were on a little e-scooter, are you going head over heels when you accidentally hit one of these things?
I mean,
because it's going
realistically,
it's going to
probably
be gray, just like the pavement will be gray.
Yeah, I don't know that we have different colors that we've used. We can certainly explore that, but just to be clear, what is in the picture, it'll be starker in person, but I do hear your concern about it, the wear and tear. And
just the fading and all the that uniform green algae that shows up. Second question, just off.
Really
sorry.
quick on that. It's the same color as a curb. So just like you can hit a curb anywhere.
Well, only if this is right, just a little bit lateral from where you're meant to be. So it's not quite
just like a
the same.
curb.
It's not like an analog. It's not an analog because this is right adjacent instead of orthogonal to one's distance.
We can, I mean, I don't think we don't have a ton of these. We can look at adding some sort of reflector or even like a lot of times you'll see a vertical element on it. So it's like a vertical element that's delineating, okay, bikes, you go here, heads, you go here. So
I mean, this is a little bit stark, but you see it on, race car tracks all the time. It's white, red, white, red, white, red, concrete to show where the concrete is. Anyway, I digress. Second question, just off of your picture to the south, there is a triangular grassy area with a really large desire path going through it. So if you're heading north from Blue Door with your lovely goodies, everybody goes through that desire path and then jumps across Broadway. Is there anything to address the lack of a continuous walkway from the east side of Main Street to the east, south of Fourth Plain, to the east side of Main Street, north of Fourth Plain?
yeah, we did briefly discuss whether adding sidewalk to the western edge of that triangle space would make sense. Ultimately that wasn't something that our engineering team was fond of. We, are looking at one of our proposed crossing locations is at 28th Street. So, to help improve the pedestrian connections around that awkward triangular path. And then C-Trans looking at some improvements to that area as well. So we're working with them to, figure out what might work there. So we are looking to, try and make that better.
Great. We'll go to Commissioner Fender.
My first comment was going to be what Commissioner Williams said about having those vertical things that have the yellow and black that point to where the curb is going to be starting, like having those or something like that, because I know myself and I know I would hit it like I would hit a curb. And I also wanted to say, adding on to what Commissioner Gatton and Commissioner Schmidt were saying about the median islands, I was questioning it before, but I do think that they are an effective traffic calming measure based on your guys' statistics you presented us. But I'm a nanny as my full-time job, and I tend to be biking or walking with a double stroller, and double strollers can range from 4 to 5.5 feet wide. And just based on the image, I don't know what those spaces are, but the cutouts don't seem to be big enough to fit a bike trailer that is that wide. And like Commissioner Schmidt was saying, someone with a bike trailer carrying cans, it doesn't look wide enough. And I would encourage that to be a thought. Also, same thing for the median islands at the pedestrian crossings, being wide enough to accommodate 2 people walking and 1 with a 5-foot stroller.
Yeah, this isn't our final design, so we definitely would consider, we'd want the width of, someone towing a trailer on their bike to be able to be there. And similarly, we'd want to make sure there's space for pedestrians going both ways in the crossing. So thanks for flagging that.
And I'll just add this, the diagram is a conceptual drawing, so it isn't to exact scale, but what we're showing here with those crosswalk bars are about 10 feet wide. So yeah. And just to clarify, what I was talking about earlier was the width of the lane and the depth of the pedestrian travel way. And so what we're talking about here is the width of the opening of the median island, so we're all on the same page. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. We're gonna move into the next segment, and this is a very important, just like all of the projects that come to the Transportation and Mobility Commission. But as the facilitator, I do want to remind, I don't have a family. I'm a single person, so I don't have to get home or whatever. So just reminding you that we will probably go past 8 if, just keep in mind as you're making comments tonight. But so we'll just wanted to plant that to the group, and we'll continue into segment 2. I can be here till midnight, Maggie, so let's keep going.
Well, I don't know if I can be here till midnight. So, so segment 2 and 3, the characteristics on these 2 segments are pretty similar. So we combine them and presenting them to you. Our original proposal was removing a northbound through lane. We'd be maintaining still a dedicated left turn lane at some key intersections. And then, also adding the marked crossings, 31st and 35th. And also what's missing on our slide here is at 37th. Feedback and considerations, 45% of survey respondents said they supported or strongly supported this design. This was more divided. We had 34% oppose or strongly oppose. We did also hear about support for wider sidewalks in this area, crossing improvements, and then we did also hear from folks about wanting to see mobility lanes potentially extended further down here. Ultimately, our refined proposal still removes a northbound through lane. Essentially, what we'd be proposing is replacing that through lane with space for the median islands and marked crossings, to maintain dedicated left turn lanes at the major intersections, in particular 33rd and 39th. Those have, higher left turn volumes, so we're looking to maintain those left turn lanes. Also, as part of our traffic analysis, when we looked at removing a northbound through lane, essentially what helped with maintaining not having a bunch of congestion was that we had either dedicated left turn lanes or a center turn lane. So really getting anyone who's turning left out of the through lanes to let traffic still be flowing well. Again, the, new marked crossings with median islands at 31st, 35th, 37th. We'd also be looking at, in some parts of these segments, the lanes are very narrow, where there are dedicated left turn lanes, two through travel lanes in each direction. But on the more southern edge of these segments, with 4 travel lanes, so 2 travel lanes in each direction, the travel lanes are actually 12 feet, which is a little too wide, we think. So looking at narrowing the travel lanes, essentially having, a small buffer on the edges of the cross section here closest to the sidewalk, so that in the future we can widen these sidewalks and reinforce the pedestrian corridor that we have in the TSP as part of this. We did, and as part of our traffic modeling, we had looked at potentially replacing a southbound lane with a bus and turn lane or bus lane. And ultimately, the southbound traffic is heavier, and we think removing a southbound lane is going to cause too much congestion, particularly for the new bus rapid transit service. We want it to still be rapid and attractive to people. So that's, part of one reason why we're moving a southbound lane. We don't think is an option here. So, really adding any sort of mobility lanes on these sections, we'd only have space for, there's not space for mobility lanes on both sides of the street. With also maintaining dedicated left turn lanes at the major intersections, we wouldn't be able to have continuous facilities. So essentially what our original proposal is, to direct to the surrounding network off of Main Street, primarily F Street and Columbia for those north-south connections. So ultimately, even if we recommended, mobility lanes on a portion of the corridor, we'd still be directing folks off of the street to those other facilities. So ultimately, we didn't think the best route was, adding mobility lanes on this segment, that it was, more wanting to really focus on that pedestrian safety, future widening of sidewalks, narrowing travel lanes. So I will pause there.
Okay, great. Commissioner Schmidt.
I'm having a strange reaction to this because I feel like as a cyclist, I would almost be more comfortable with the way things are now, because then I'd have a safe spot in that second lane that's there than other traffic. Now that this lane's being taken away and I don't have anywhere to go, I'm going to be sharing it with the travel lane. And now I have less space. Whereas before, if there was 2 lanes, then I could rely, the car's just going to take the left lane and I have my cool spot in the right. Not ideal. But now with this, I'm like, man, this is almost worse. Like, I don't want to argue, let's keep things the way they are. But because there's the absence of the mobility lane, I'm going to have 2 choices. Am I going to stay in the travel lane? Am I going to get on the sidewalk? How is that going to work out? And then if I'm on the sidewalk, I'm getting in the way of the reason we're widening the sidewalks, which is for pedestrians and people with wheelchair access. So, and I also want to put that out. I think it's great to do diversions when there's not the space available. That's awesome. But people don't know that. And they're going to do what they think is convenient in the moment. And that's going to be to keep going down Main. So I feel like from a cycling standpoint, I would almost like, if there's going to be no mobility lane, I don't want to lose that lane, because essentially the right lane is the cycle lane right now. And so it would almost be more dangerous. Like, I don't know. I guess that's an odd perspective. But when I'm thinking about how it actually plays out, that's how I see it happening with the new proposal.
Yeah. I understand that, not having that space for cars to, essentially go around you. Ultimately, what our thinking is that we want to slow speeds on the street, so, that the speed is more comparable for someone riding a bicycle going in the northbound direction. I don't, that's probably not as possible with the incline. But that's kind of what our, thinking and approach is, that we want to slow speeds on the street so that if someone is riding a bicycle on it, they're going to be going a more comparable speed. And, to your point about just not knowing where the locations are, in terms of facilities that aren't along Main Street, let's say someone's riding their bike along Main Street. Our hope is to really have good wayfinding to direct people to those connections, so that when you get to those decision points, there's signage directing you to the safer networks. That realistically, we're not going to have every signage on every intersection of Main Street being like, go to F Street, go to F Street. But again, like at those connection and decision points, really trying to make the signage clear so that when folks are on the go, they can just look at the sign. They don't need to pull up their phone or something. So yeah, I think that. Anything to add, Derek or Rebecca?
Well, I just say the other option is go to F Street. Use the parallel network, unless, you're going a block or two, but.
Can I ask you, I don't know, I'm sure there's something behind this, but I'm always wondering what's up with Washington Street? Like is that some kind of, I'm always like, Washington, wow, this is great. But I guess there's something I'm not seeing here.
Correct. There is a long history behind Washington Street. So it's the last one-way road in downtown that hasn't been converted back to two-way. So most of downtown used to be like couplets, essentially. Not good for businesses. And basically we have held on doing anything on Washington. There's been concepts of converting it back to two-way, or of using it for like taking a lane and using it for like a really, really good southbound bike route. Which is still on the table. The challenge is that we have not known what's going to happen through the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. And so we wanted to maintain as much flexibility on Washington Street as possible. I've been here for 10 years. We restarted IBR actually in 2019 maybe. And so there's been this we've got a hold, and there's also been this sense that this is the southbound route for C-Trans BRT network, and which may need a dedicated lane at some point. And so if that's the case, maybe we don't want to convert it back to two-way. Maybe we want a dedicated transit lane, a southbound lane, a bike lane, so it's just been a lot of questions up in the air. So we will get to Washington at some point, because we will need to repave it at some point, and then we'll have an opportunity once we fully know the sort of downtown transit circulation plan that Maggie's working on, with a bunch of folks related to Library Square, redevelopment, the light rail, the lid, all the things that are coming with I-5, and also the access points to the freeway. So that's what's up with Washington. It's sort of this long, unresolved saga that you all can be involved in helping to shape next time we get some paving work scheduled, teed up there.
Great. We'll go to Commissioner Williams.
So I'm seeing 2 marked crossings out of a possibility of 7. What gives?
So a possibility of 7, you mean counting every intersection?
Yes. The ones at which 9 out of 10 motorists do not believe that you have to yield to a pedestrian in an unpainted crosswalk, which we all know is contrary to state law. But nonetheless, popular opinion says you don't stop for a pedestrian if it doesn't have markings.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main drivers being that we're, in this case in particular, there's significant crossing gaps already. We're filling those gaps with some new marked crossings to meet our pedestrian crossing policy. Whether we, would stripe a marked crossing at every intersection, I don't know. I'll let Derek chime in.
I mean, that's right. And I'll add that, while it might seem like throwing down marked crossings at every leg of every intersection is a good idea, it actually is not great for compliance, for stopping or yielding compliance, because as you probably know, I mean, if we're talking about driver compliance at marked crossings, at unmarked crossings, like we don't always see stopping and yielding, right? So simply throwing down more paint on the road is not the surefire solution that we'd like it to be. But we actually see decreases in compliance and in the efficacy of the treatment. So we want to be strategic about where we place them. Yeah, it's not just a resource, cost concern. It is very much a strategic one.
Okay, second question is, if I recall the numbers on the turnings off of Main Street onto 31st and 32nd, they were vanishingly small. Why are we dedicating that much asphalt to a left turning motion? Put in some more traffic islands, these little, or the refuges. If you say you want safety, then do safety. If you're talking about trying to slow people down, well, maybe I do actually have to pause to let the car turn left in front of me. I'm seeing a disconnect in the rhetoric from the rendition.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in some cases, a dedicated turning lane is helpful for any sort of turning conflicts, because if you're a driver, you're not feeling that pressure build up behind you. You're gonna not maybe you're going to take a less risky movement if you have no one waiting behind you, is one kind of, approach or mentality. You're correct that I don't think these left turn lanes are necessarily needed at these specific intersections. There are some places where we do want to make sure we have them, just because we only have the one northbound through lane. So anyone that's making a left turn here, is going to cause more congestion to back up. So sometimes it's not about how many left turns there are, but how many through vehicles we have, and wanting to get, people turning left out of that through lane.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Fun.
Looking at the two white lines you have on there to reduce the lane to 11 foot. So you have one foot between the sidewalk and the
3 feet.
3 feet? Okay. 3 feet one way on each side. Okay, that's the case. I don't have any comment.
Okay, Commissioner Grandstaff.
Thank you. I just had one quick question. On when it says future sidewalk widening, do we kind of have an idea of when the future of that project may be? Just so I know, I'm not asking for a specific date, but is there a general idea maybe?
Yeah, to my knowledge, not exactly. We'd be looking, either to seek grant funding to fund something like that. Sidewalks are just very costly. So yeah, that could be grant funding for a sidewalk widening project. Often we talk about, redevelopment occurs, and the folks that are developing that land parcel being required to make sidewalk improvements. I'll let Rebecca chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, yeah, our standard answer, right, which is like what Maggie said, sidewalks are expensive. We have limited funding. We try to go after grants for them. We plan for them we put them in our corridor plan so that we have them on the books, right? And then we can go after the grants. I will say though, in this particular corridor, it's a pretty underutilized, underdeveloped from a built environment land use perspective. And so we will expect, I think, to see actually significant redevelopment. It's also, again, identified as an area that will accommodate fairly significant growth through our comprehensive plan, and will be rezoned. So I think here more than say other places perhaps that are more recently or more fully built out, you actually will see sidewalk improvements through redevelopment. And unfortunately, that is the way we get almost all of our sidewalk improvements done.
Just really quickly, make a note here that, what we're talking about is not just the widening of the sidewalk, it's reconstructing the curb, it's reconstructing the gutter, it's reconstructing stormwater facilities. So that's a part of the cost, the package that we're describing when we say widening sidewalks.
Okay, here I'll just echo the comments made by Commissioner Williams on the safety of promoting safety along the corridor. I was as he was making comments and before thinking about how we keep vehicles out of that yellow area, because then you have those drivers who are just like, well, great, let me just use it as a passing lane or whatever that might be. But then I think in some place where we would just add a median all the way down, I could see that being also encouraging for able-bodied folks to just cross at that point, because it'd be like, well, there's like a median here, and so let me just jump on into the middle and then jump across where there is no crossing. And so I don't know how we further refine this, but I am in agreement with Commissioner Williams that I think that there is more to be done to ensure the safety on this segment. And just for clarity, 31st, 35th, 37th would all have a similar treatment to what is pictured there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Just making sure.
marked crossing with a median island. To your first point, just that, in some cases, our recommendations might have a phased approach where, a painted buffer is the near-term solution, a concrete buffer might be the longer-term solution. One, major benefit of having more of the painted buffer is for emergency vehicles to be able to get around traffic if it is backed up. I think if we painted it as a two-way left turn lane, that often seems more encouraging and okay to drive in versus if we have some, there are some people it will probably deter with having a different just kind of striping that's in that space. But of course, we unfortunately can't control everyone and their choices.
Okay, we can proceed.
Okay. So this is where it gets real tricky. 39th to 45th Street. So 39th Street is, our most constrained intersection on the corridor. We have 2 travel lanes in each direction and then dedicated left turn lanes. Currently today, the existing travel lanes are between 10 and 9 feet wide, which really isn't wide enough to even accommodate the width of C-Tran vehicles. And what we heard, from folks about this intersection in our first round of engagement was doesn't feel safe as a pedestrian. We were also looking at the TSP does identify 39th to the Discovery Trail on our, bike and small mobility network. So what our original proposal was to, again, remove a northbound travel lane here. That gives us space to widen the other travel lanes, accommodate buses, large trucks, fire trucks, and then having the protected 2-way multi-use path start at 40th Street. So not connecting to 39th Street. What we heard from folks, was 61% were supportive or strongly supportive of this design. We had 27% that opposed, and that's just based off our survey responses. We did also hear from folks about, if we're going to be directing people to F Street, the 39th and F Street crossing, feeling really unsafe. And also, folks really pushing us to extend some kind of facility to 39th Street. So we ended up, looking at both kind of the 39th Street and 40th Street intersections here. Ultimately, we have two options for this refined proposal. So this shows, removing one northbound travel lane, widening the other travel lanes, the protected two-way multi-use path starting at 40th Street to the Discovery Trail. We're looking at adding buffered bike lanes on 40th Street to F Street. So between Main and F Street, help get folks to, the F Street connection. We're looking at adding some curb extensions, also commonly known as diverters. So partial diverters at the 39th and F Street intersection. Really help deter cut-through traffic on F Street and support, the future neighborhood greenway on F Street. And looking at adding median islands, rapid flashing beacon, and marked crossings at 39th and F Street. And that would be 2 marked crossings at that intersection. So essentially one for people using bikes or small mobility devices. They'd essentially, ramp up onto that curb extension, go through the crossing, and then continue south or north on F Street. Then also another marked crossing at that location for pedestrians. So this is one option that we're looking at. One thing I do want to flag is the multi-use path at 40th. We'd be looking at making we wouldn't be looking at making that sidewalk level. Again, the impacts of, having to do reduced stormwater treatments. So that essentially would be have some kind of physical protection for people on bikes or small mobility devices on that multi-use path, but there would be sidewalk, and then there would be a shared facility for people going north-south on a bicycle or scooter.
Excuse me, can we move the little Zoom thing off of the corner so I can see what's underneath? Thank you.
So yeah, moving that better shows those partial diverters, which are essentially, again, a curb extension. So they're concrete sidewalk that extends out. So if someone were riding their bicycle on F Street, let's say from 40th, they would ramp up onto this curb extension, go through the crossing, and then ramp down off the other curb extension. What this does is it helps, essentially vehicles can only come out of F Street. They would not be able to turn left or turn right onto F Street. So helping lower traffic volumes, make it more pedestrian and friendly to bike and small mobility users.
So if there's going to be some changes at 39th Street and probably a little bit more delay to not let people to prevent diversion traffic to avoid the intersection, right? So you can't turn, if you're going westbound, you can't turn right on F Street and then left on 40th to avoid the intersection. The idea is you have to go through the intersection. So it lets people who live there out and make movements, but you can't use it to divert to avoid if you're through traffic. Done that on, where's the other one on C and Forest Plain? People might be familiar with that. E. C. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Before we pause for questions, I want to just share the other option. So our option B essentially is everything we talked about in option A, but would add a southbound mobility lane from 40th to 39th with a 2-foot buffer protection here. Essentially, if someone is using the multi-use path connection at 40th Let's say they're coming southbound. They would come from that multi-use path. They would cross the street to the west to get to the other side of Main Street, and then be able to use the bike lane there to connect to the bike lanes on 39th. Essentially why we, this is the space that we have to work with, is that we can only put a mobility lane in one direction on this one block. The southbound direction seemed more favorable because really what, we're already directing folks that want to do make connections on the east side to F Street. So really what we want to do is improve that west side connection to Columbia. So the southbound direction being more appealing for that, but also just the land uses on the east side of the street. There's a gas station there, large driveways, cars coming in and out a lot. Having a connection on the west side of the street just seems safer and less potential conflict there. Less out of direction travel for southbound.
So, I mean, you guys pushed us. And you said, yeah, if you don't get to 39th Street, don't do the project, I think someone said, which we all have our own opinions. But basically, we're trying to get, so if you're going southbound and then you're going to go to the east side, you're going to turn off at 40th off the multi-use path and go over to F to travel south. If you want to go southbound to westbound and you don't have a good route over to Columbia, you now have a bike lane down to 39th where you can then take 39th and the existing facilities there westbound either to Columbia or to continue west. Someone made the point in their testimony connecting over to things like Fruit Valley. So we really worked hard, and I want to emphasize this is not a small change. It likely requires us to replace signal poles and mast arms. We have to realign the intersection so that there's receiving lanes, but we were looking and trying to be able to fit that one block southbound segment to not force cyclists out of direction, to be responsive to this group's comments at the last meeting.
And also just again, to reiterate here, this intersection is where we're most constrained. There's a lot of traffic that comes through here. So removing a southbound lane is not something we think we can do here. It's ultimately just going to result in the new bus rapid transit service, we think, getting stuck in too much congestion, which we want to make that service attractive. We want to get more folks using transit and on this rapid service.
Backboard, but also we heard you on 45th Street not being a viable alternative. So that we don't have a good way for cyclists and small mobility users to get west to Columbia north of 39th. So we heard you all that we need to get people to 39th. I do want to say, can I talk about the WashDOT facility? Mm-hmm. I do want to say that long term, so WashDOT has an operations center here on the west side of the street at 40th. And if we might have, so basically it cuts off the grid. And so longer term, they have actually purchased a site to relocate this facility because it's a really bad place for a highway maintenance facility. But it will take multiple legislative funding sessions to actually, prepare that site and build it. But eventually we would require that street to be reconnected through the grid, and we would be able to get people over to Columbia at 40th Street, if that makes sense. Or so longer term, that's our preferred option. But in the meantime, again, we tried to hear and respond to what this group said, which was get southbound folks to 39th without making them travel out of direction.
Okay, you ready? Great. We'll go to Commissioner Schmidt.
I just want to say I really appreciate you taking our feedback and taking it seriously and working on it. And I guess this is a weird question. Why is it option A or B? Why isn't that just the refined proposal? Why is that option B? I guess I'm confused on that.
I mean, I think we'd, love to hear whether that's a useful connection.
Okay. Yeah, I like option B.
Yeah.
better than option A.
Yeah, or whether folks would say, no, let's just direct everyone to F Street no matter what. So yeah.
Great. I think I would also add that it sounds like there is a significant cost difference to doing it because you have to move things.
Yeah, so cost implications, this ultimately has this option has more implications in terms of signal upgrades and replacement that we need to do. The other thing is our southbound left turn lane is narrower than our typical lane. It would be 9 feet instead of 10 feet. We do think based off our turn modeling that fire trucks and buses would still be able to make that left turn onto 39th Street. So that was one exception we also had to make.
Can I add to that? I'm sorry. Just the idea of it costing more money. I think going back to what some people said at the last meeting of if you don't get to 39th, there's no point. That maybe adding this is actually more cost effective because it will result in more use. So I think that's awesome.
Great. Okay, Commissioner Gatton.
Yeah, I just want to voice what Commissioner Schmidt said, that it's appreciated that the plans, at least with option B here, were adjusted for people going south if they want to get over to Columbia. A thought that I had when I was looking over this a couple of nights ago was if you're going to go east, let's say you're traveling south, I wonder if it would be less confusing because you're coming off of a two-way multi-use path right north of 40th there. If instead of making, the southbound users jog to the south side of 40th Street there, if just on the north side of 40th have the multi-use path in both directions and then connect to F, because I mean, I'm sure there'll be a learning curve and, eventually people will get it, but if you're already in a two-way, it's only another block just to extend that around the corner so that people aren't having to cross 40th Street and then they can go at F Street versus at Main.
Yeah, we did look at that. We ultimately felt like doing the buffered bike lanes in each direction seemed just a bit safer. In particular, there's a driveway conflict here. We looked at, okay, could we put a multi-use path here and then close that driveway, which just ultimately felt like we could put, safe facilities on either side of the street and still keep that driveway open for those businesses. And yeah, I don't know if we had other reasons to do the buffered bike lane, but
one of the other reasons is the two-way facility on the north side, because of the width of the street itself, the curb to curb width, we would have had to keep one of the bike lanes on the street anyway, unless we rebuilt, a whole new path. And so rather than having one of the bikes on the street and then one of the bikes sharing the sidewalk with pedestrians, there's some it's cleaner, more understandable if bikes are doing their thing separately entirely than mixing them with dedicated pedestrian facilities on the north side. So there's little details like that kind of steer us in this direction.
I think mostly though, it's really hard to close driveways. It's not like you could make people do it. So the risk, I think we talked about this a lot because we actually changed the design in this presentation fairly last minute, because just the folks coming out of that driveway who are going to be turning right and only looking, to their left for people going westbound just seemed like a bigger safety issue than just putting people in protected bike facilities on opposite sides of the street in the way people are used to. And then we don't have to mess with closing a driveway, which we probably wouldn't be able to do. But that was our previous transportation.
yeah, there was also, we looked at, okay, this parcel has another driveway that's further to the east. But the way that their parking lot is striped is we would have to consider restriping their parking lot, just like lots of implications that get added on there. So yeah, we thought this was a better option.
Do you have any additional comments? Okay, great. We'll go to Commissioner Williams.
So those purple dots kind of flashed up pretty quickly, so I'm just gonna, for more of my clarification, it seems to me are there some green stripes that are missing off of this picture, this rendering? For example, if you're cycling east on 39th, crossing Main. No, keep going to your left, your other left. South side, if you're cycling east. Oughtn't there be a green crosswalk kind of parallel to that? I'm just trying to understand, because that's the suggested. If you're coming from Columbia to go north on the cycle track, you're going to go straight across Main Street. And then you're going to go take a left onto F. So likewise, that kind of diagonal angly thing should be kind of green, I suppose. Just again, from my understanding.
Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head what our standards say in terms of when we use the green hatching or not. But yeah, we could consider adding that to, the south side of Main here. And then what we'd probably do is make some of the hatching on one of those crossings green, or some kind of way to symbolize that this is for small mobility and bike users.
My experience has been that the green markings help the motorist say, oh, there's going to be a bicycle here. It helps the bicyclist. Oh, I need to be here. I remember riding through Seattle, some intersection I'd never ridden across in my life, and I go, holy cats! Oh, I'm in the right place because I'm on a green thing. Now, whether I was going to the right place, I don't know. And so I guess by the final token, there ought to be a green thing across 40th as you exit the cycle track going south, and then you're going to turn east on 40th. So it's, again, just kind of a wayfinding thing. Okay, that's some kind of final question. Is there any RFID or something, not ID, rapid flashing light? Yeah, that one, see, not the radio frequency identificator. To 39th, as you know, can get really busy. Is there any push button to alert motorists that you want to get across?
Yes, that's part of our recommendation, is to add a rapid flashing beacon at that intersection. Again, having to look at how we could place the push buttons, and whether it could be, push buttons at both crossings for one joint rapid flashing beacon are mechanics to figure out.
Okay. That's right. Yeah, I can pass it.
Correct that one.
Great. Okay. We can proceed, it looks like.
So last segment 5, so 45th Street to the city limits. We actually didn't show any design alternatives for this one last time. So, really what we heard about this section was feeling unsafe for pedestrians, people riding bikes. We heard a lot about there's an existing connection on the west side of the street that doesn't feel safe, isn't well paved or maintained. And there's no, there's the sidewalk gap that's just south of the 45th Street intersection here. Essentially, that one of those northbound through lanes is what will be our multi-use path there. And so at the 45th Street, just north of here, what we're proposing is improvements on that west side connection. So, putting making that smoother, more comfortable for people using bikes and small mobility devices, having clear wayfinding signage that this is a connection that you can use here for this. You know, adding some kind of striping or indication that cyclists are going to be coming down there as well on Hazeldale Avenue. And then on the west side of the street, again, continuing the two-way multi-use path. We don't show it in this graphic, but essentially just north of 45th Street on the eastern side of the street, there's going to be a new C-Tran bus stop. So basically, north of the intersection, there will still be just one northbound through lane there. The C-Tran bus stop, I could do both, would go about there, and essentially the multi-use path will go behind that bus stop. We're working closely with C-Tran on that design, and then connect to the Discovery Trail path. So just north of the new C-Tran stop, another northbound lane will come back. It kind of also helps give sort of a queue jump for the transit stop, that there's just the one northbound through lane. So transit will just continue straight ahead. And wayfinding signage just being a really important piece here. We really want to discourage folks from riding on essentially the I-5 on-ramps there, and instead using Discovery Trail and the off-street multi-use paths to navigate up to Hazeldale. And then the last piece for segment 5, which again, we didn't share this the first time, where, you know, this would still be a very longer term solution, is north of Northeast Ross Street on Main Street. Currently, so that's where the railroad underpass is. There's bike lanes on both sides of the street. They're pretty narrow, especially in that underpass. So looking at whether we could maintain the width of the existing travel lanes, we'd essentially want to propose potentially shifting the travel lanes to the west. So the space, the bike lane space that currently exists there could essentially be combined on the east side of the street, giving us more space for, again, a two-way multi-use path that's protected. We don't want to implement this unless we have agreement from the county that they will have a similar facility, you know, just north of the railroad underpass. It would require them to have some kind of signalization just north, or facilitate some kind of crossing there just north of the city limits. So really wanting to make sure that, you know, as long as if they're committed and can provide those connections, we want to work with them to make sure that there's a consistent treatment across the jurisdiction lines there. So this is, one option that we would propose for that. We still want to work closely with the county to figure out what might be possible for them. And I think that's all we have. So I'll pause there.
On the left. Okay. Great. Okay. Commissioner Williams.
My only concern about that cycle track is coming down the hill, you can get going really fast. And if you're passing somebody going up or walking or whatever, that seems a little interesting.
On this connection here, so like
Yes,
if you're
the
coming
potential
south,
long term, as you come underneath that railroad bridge, it's easy to be at the speed limit, which is already way too high.
yeah. And you're talking about specifically if we had, let's say, cyclists coming in both directions. Yeah, I mean, potentially, you know, adding signage to kind of like warn folks, hey, there's oncoming, you know, people walking or biking or scootering, might be one thing we'd consider, but that's a good thing to flag.
Any further questions or comments on this segment? Okay. like it would be useful for me at least to see a rendering of this potential long-term solution as an aerial view of like what you've done with the other segments, just to be able to.
Yeah, we could certainly whip something up that wouldn't be to scale, but yeah, would kind of help show that visual.
That's right. Okay. Seeing no further questions or comments, we'll proceed into the next portion.
So really just to kind of wrap up, you know, this was our last sort of workshop we have with the TMC. We're planning to, you know, do final refinements to these design concepts and come with our final recommendation in July with a TMC hearing. And then we would continue the project on. So that's our last touch point for that project that we'd have with the TMC.
So what I heard tonight is general, I think, outline or general with I think what the staff is leaning towards recommending. Easy improvements or some additional cross bike markers at 39th and Main and 40th and Main. The bigger thing that I heard is the section between 31st and 39th and folks not liking the treatment there. And so we can do our best to revisit that. We are on a very, very tight timeline for paving. I guess my question for the commission is, sorry, we can take another look at 31st to 39th. I think our options are limited, or bring you a couple different options.
Yeah, and just that our paving extents are for summer 2025, our 39th, essentially just south of there to the city limits. So there are sections south of there that would be longer term improvements. So there could be more time, but something we'd have to figure out. Oh.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I'm looking for nods from the commission that you're ready or able to vote on a recommendation at least 39th North, and you could, you know, condition that on continuing to review south of 39th Street. It'd actually be a little bit south of 39th Street because we do have to go back, you know, chase it back like 200 feet to get the intersection alignment, but. So I see nods. Great.
Commission. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Schmidt.
Is paving from 39th on, we need to vote on that now or in July, but we can kind of hold off on the 31st through 39th and wait for other options because there's not as great of a timeline. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I guess I'm asking, are you ready to vote? And if not, on the south of 39th Street, are you ready to vote if you can basically condition it and say, we still want to look at this section because there's more time?
Yeah, I am following. I see Commissioner Fund. Are you trying to make a comment? Okay.
We might be able to pick and choose, and I don't know how that go, but if the staff is okay with both of the options you'll be presenting, and then this body pick a prefer, and we might go ahead and do a recommendation at that time.
So what I'm suggesting is we'll make a recommendation, one, north of 39th Street. And if you can't support what we have showed you today, south of 39th Street, you can vote on the segments north of there and just agree to hold on the segment south of 39th Street that won't be paved next year.
Okay. I see, it seems like a majority, so we'll go, we'll go in that direction to do it. Okay. I think I'll just need some follow-up information on how what this looks like between that 45th to 40th. Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Mhm.
certainly provide an aerial view via email of that. So north of Ross Street. And again, that would be a longer, that's probably,
Yeah. 40 to 45th, 45th to 40, like southbound. Like, what are we not doing anything in that section to?
There's a two-way cycle track on the west side or on the east side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. No, I'm tracking.
Okay.
Okay. And that's where the planter things are. Okay. The political sign graveyard. Yeah, go ahead.
so, yeah, one northbound through lane is turning into a multi-use path.
Let's just create an aerial view for my small
Can we
brain.
show one?
So the exhibits we have show just north of 40th, and then we had another exhibit that showed just south of 45th. So if you kind of connect the two cross sections, they're the same essentially, and they.
We can do better than that.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Also to making sure that all of our commissioners are getting the full description of what this looks like through the other corridor. We do. We also have representatives of folks who are not able to see or hear that. So just so we can go through all of that, I think it's beneficial to all of us. Okay. No further comments, questions, commissioners, at this point. Okay, we'll proceed.
Great. So we'll be back in July for the hearing. Thank you.
Okay, great. I could have done that one. Wonderful. Well, thank you for that presentation, Maggie, Dirk, and Mr. Abe.
And Randy
go ahead.
for being online as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Randy. Randy, you said Randy, right? Okay, Randy Johnson. Sorry, this was not on my notes, but that's okay. All right. Well, proceeding along, and thank you for the lively discussion again. We appreciate the time that people take and the care that all of us show in determining the future of our transportation system. And just so that we are, again, in alignment, we are going to vote on that first segment north of 39th. I have to say it's a little trippy in my head thinking because it goes downhill. Anyways, we'll not get into that. We'll vote on that first, and then we'll coordinate on when the next piece comes to the commission.
Yeah, we'll work with you, Chair, on the mechanics of a vote that essentially conditionally approves the plan pending some additional discussion on the segment that's not being paved next year. Yeah.
Great. We love conditions. Okay. We will move into the last portion of our meeting, the staff and commissioner communications. Deputy Director Kennedy, please take it away.
Yeah, just wanted to announce to the commission that Commissioner Mohandasi has had some life changes that make it so he can no longer serve on the commission. And so we've obviously thanked him for his service. And then we are going to be re-advertising for the position of someone whose primary mode is driving. So if there are people that you know and audience members, please spread the word. It will be posted on the city's boards and commissions page. And I will send it out to everyone once it's posted. So just wanted to let you all know that. That's all I have, Chair.
Okay. Any commissioners have information for good of the order? Go ahead. It's okay. Go ahead.
I just kind of wanted to mention something that's been on my mind for like years, probably. But something I feel is kind of missing from our discussions or even some of the when we gather data, and that's our traffic signals and how they are organized, and more specifically preemptions and who's allowed to do that. So obviously emergency vehicles and the bus can do preemptions of lights, which basically means the light system starts all over and goes in their favor, right? And in the city of Vancouver, emergency vehicles can do this even when they're not in an emergency. So something to contrast with that is the city of Portland, only a fire truck can do that when it's not an emergency because of its size. This is also something in Vancouver that's not really kept track of. So it is, right? The data is recorded on who does the preemption, but there's no follow-up. And there's no real regulation of it. And I think that that's really something that should be coming out with our level of service data gathering in terms of speed and how fast people can travel through a corridor. So thinking about Mill Plain, for example, where there's a hospital located, there's different cop shops. And so there's kind of more emergency vehicles that are traveling along that corridor that maybe aren't often having an emergency and are preempting the light in favor of themselves. And that's not something we keep track of. And that really can alter the way that our infrastructure plays out. We could build and design the most perfect infrastructure, but if the lights aren't detecting us, and this is all of us, this is drivers. Obviously, it happens to cyclists more because we aren't able to detect the lights at induction loops. And that's a whole other thing. And I would maybe even suggest, if that's possible, to have some kind of educational thing or something like that coming out of staff presentations on areas. How are the lights coordinated? I think that would be really helpful for all modes of transportation because that preemption thing, that was kind of shocking to me. And I think that there is a reason that it should be regulated because it's something that is obviously going to be abused. Like if I had that power, I would be doing it all the time. So just thinking about that, I think that it really affects the way that we all travel. And I just wanted to throw that out there that I'd like to see more of that kind of focus because the traffic signals are a huge part of our infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt, and staff. Maybe a note for future retreat topics. That sounds like would be the most fitting. Okay, well, I think from my part, I just want to give a round of applause and please join me for Commissioner Gatton for completing his first meeting. That's great. And you know, I apologize for being unable to attend your orientation, but I am very excited to have you join the commission. And to the rest of you, as I do at every commission meeting, I hope thank you for your time. Your contribution to the city of Vancouver is not small or insignificant. It's a huge time commitment, and I'm very honored to be serving alongside all of you. Because our discussions here make a very large impact in the lives of people. So thank you for being active participants, and we will continue to build that transportation system for all. So, and to the staff for all the coordination that you do for the meetings. Ms. Nishik, you are the glue. And another round of applause for you. Great, that is it. Sorry, I missed the other meeting, so I had to like really make sure that people know that how much I appreciate the time. So at that 8:20, the meeting is adjourned.